bienvenidos a One SDSU podcast. I'm your co-host Andrea Babever, and I'm a graduate student in the Masters in Social Work and graduate assistant for the Cross-Cultural Center at San Diego State University, Imperial Valley.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Lopez, and I will be your co-host for today. I am the Cross-Cultural Center Coordinator here at San Diego State Imperial Valley, where One SDSU podcast is based.
One SDSU podcast hope to create unity within SDSU students and campuses, empower diversity and ethnic backgrounds, and encourage podcast creation. Este es un espacio para todos. En el episodio de hoy hablaremos de podcast editing, audio, and mixing.
Our guest speaker today is Dr. Pamela Lack, Director of the Library's Digital Humanities Center from SDSU main campus in San Diego. Hello, Pam. Welcome back.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back.
We're happy to have you here.
Oh, yeah. Are you ready for me to get started?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. I want to just introduce my colleague, Patrick Flanagan, who is the DH Center Programs and Operations Specialist here in SDSU Library and the go-to expert in all things podcasting. Everything I learned from him. Before I start screen sharing, I'm just going to put a bunch of links into the chat, including links to the resources that we've created for this workshop, as well as additional resources. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start with our land acknowledgement. I'm sitting here in San Diego on the land of the Kumeyaay, but I want to do the Imperial Valley land acknowledgement. For millennia, the Kumeyaay, Kuchan, and Kokopah people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay, Kuchan, and Kokopah. And I also want to acknowledge that this workshop wouldn't be possible without Zoom, which is headquartered on the traditional lands of the Muwekma Ohlone and Tamiya Nation in what we now call San Jose, California. This technology, which allows us to connect across vast distances, is not without invisible costs, both in terms of human labor and environmental impact. And I'll finally add that a land acknowledgement is a beginning, not a replacement for action. And I invite everyone to think about how we can be stewards of the land, how we can think about acting on land acknowledgements and potentially even giving back the land. Okay, so as I mentioned, when I put those links in the Zoom chat, we have lots of resources for you to use and reuse. You can use that QR code if you're on your phone to capture the link to that tiny URL. We've got lots of slides, we've got tip sheets, training videos, and sample audio to play with if you're not ready to create your own audio yet. What we're going to do today, I'm going to do a deeper dive into Audacity, which you saw last week as I started recording, but I'm going to focus today on editing, not on recording. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to improve sound quality if your recording isn't that great. And we're going to focus mostly on creating what we call a multi-track, where we have multiple different audio pieces stitched together to form that rich podcast. So we'll look at how to splice your audio, rearrange it, improve it, make transitions, fade-ins, fade-outs, things like that. I'm going to go through the whole process of creating a podcast, a very short podcast, maybe a minute or two today, so you can see that process start to finish. So there are a lot of slides in this slide deck, but mostly I'm going to be doing a live demo, and these slides are more for future reference. So if you everything that I demo, I will show you that there are slides for with steps of how to do that and screenshots and things like that. So I'm mostly going to just do live demo today. And as a reminder, whenever we're working in the wonderful world of audio or really anything, we want to make sure that we're not violating anybody's copyright or their artistic expression. And so we want to use free stuff. And these are links to sites where you can get license-free, royalty-free music and sound effects. Or you can create your own music, or if you have friends who are artists, use their creations and give them credit to sort of cross-promote them. Okay, I'm going to pause in these slides right now and just we were talking about recording last week, and there were a couple things we didn't really have time to do. So you saw me do a really in-depth demo of how to record when it's just you. So that's a great technique for if you're recording a scripted intro or an outro or interludes between segments of your podcast. But oftentimes podcasting involves multiple people in conversation with each other. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. And I wanted to just go back to last week's slides for just a moment, just to cover a few things. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I wanted to just acknowledge it. So generally speaking, the goal in, sorry, I'm trying to pull up a website at the same time I'm talking, which is just never going to work. Okay. So generally speaking, what we want to do when we have multiple voices in a podcast is we want to create something like this. And this is what we call a multi-track. And you can see that there are 6 tracks of unique audio files. There's 3 speakers. Those are the first 3 rows. Then we have some intro music. In the 5th track, we have some sound effects, and then we have some background music and outro in the last row, that 6th track. The goal of a multi-track is to isolate each type of sound from each other to give you the greatest control in editing. So for instance, if Andrea is speaking a lot louder than Danielle, we can adjust that at the track level by lowering one person, de-amplifying one person, and amplifying another. We can do more effective fade-ins with music and have low, soft music playing underneath voice without overpowering voices. And rather than have to set that up while we're recording to have the music playing while you're recording, we would import that into our workspace and create that multi-track. So it can be, if you have access to a professional recording studio and you have multiple people, you can actually isolate each other's voices. And that's the fancy studio that Patrick has been building here in San Diego at our library, is a studio where we can have multiple people in the room, but isolate each voice so that each voice is its own isolated audio track. And that helps us with editing. But sometimes that's just not an option. And so oftentimes what we've been recommending is using Zoom. And one of the beauties of Zoom is that by now, after 3 or 4 years of pandemic, most people are familiar with Zoom and comfortable with it. A lot of people have Zoom accounts. If you're a student, you have a student account. And we can configure it in such a way to isolate each audio. And so essentially what you can do is either in a cloud recording, or if you are recording to your computer using the desktop app, you can create an audio-only file that is part of what's produced in your recording. And sometimes that's by default that there is an audio file, but you can go further and say that you want to produce a standalone audio file for each speaker. And so what you would do is in your settings, you would go to your recording tab, and you could actually say, and I've highlighted it here, record a separate audio file of each participant. What this does is it creates an audio file with everybody's voice mixed together and separate audio files of each speaker. If you have like 10 people speaking in a Zoom, you'll get 10 separate audio files. You have to remember to save. I always forget to do this, and then it doesn't register my change. Then when the cloud recording is done, you'll get a link to the recording in your recording tab. And you'll see here that the standard thing that you get is the shared screens, the videos. Here's the audio only. This one has all the speakers together. But then if I click down here, it will show me all of the audio only of each participant. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were actually 5 of us in this audio, but because I was sharing sound on my computer, it registered me twice as like 2 different speakers. And this way, I can download each one as a separate file, edit it separately, pull it all together. If there's any gaffes, we can edit that out. If one person was much further away from their microphone, I can adjust sound levels in a much easier way. Likewise, you can do this on if you prefer to record to your computer. You can do the same thing where you do that in your desktop app. And then wherever your Zoom files are saved, you'll just go there and find all of those individual recordings. One quick thing to note is that Zoom typically saves audio files in a format called an M4A. And unless you install certain kinds of libraries in Audacity, you won't be able to bring an M4A in. So you'll have to convert it first. And I use these online audio converters, either onlineaudioconverter.com or Convertio. You just upload your M4A, tell it you want it in either MP3 or a waveform, whatever you want, wave file rather, and then download it. Then you can bring it into Audacity and edit it. So that's just one extra step, but it's a lot easier to do. And if you don't like Zoom or you're not comfortable with it, there are other tools that you can use. During the height of the pandemic, we used Zencaster quite a bit, which also does the same thing. And back in the day, didn't have a video component, but by like 2021, it had introduced video, and you could record an audio, but turn your video on just to facilitate a natural conversation. A lot of people also use Squadcast. These have free trials, but they are not free products. Oops. And the other thing I would say is some people have a lot of success using WhatsApp and other phone apps. And if you follow out that Zoom link, that tiny URL link that I have in the slides, in our tip sheets, you'll see under recording options, we have information about WhatsApp and similar things there. So if, particularly if you are recording with folks in other countries, a lot of people do like to use WhatsApp. Okay. With that, I'm going to continue on, and I would just encourage if there are any questions, you can go ahead and type those into the chat, and my colleague Patrick will try to answer those in real time, or if it's something that I'm not seeing, he'll flag me down and I'll stop and answer that question in real time. Okay, so with that, let me just check my notes and make sure I'm good. See where I am. Okay, I'm just going to go through a few more slides, and then I'm going to switch over to demo.
Hello, Pam. We do have a question on the chat.
Yeah, I see, Vanessa, you have a question about video. Can you expand on your question? I'm not sure.
I believe the question is about if we can also divide like the video in sections.
There are different recording settings for video, but I'm not. Let me look really quickly and see whether you can actually record. I mean, in video, you probably wouldn't want to have each video separated. It's really more the audio for editing sound quality, but there are a bunch of different recording settings, including like I use gallery view for my recordings so that if we're not screen sharing, we can see everybody in the gallery. But I don't see any settings for actually isolating video from each person. So that is not, it doesn't appear to be a current setting, but you can do the one video with multiple audio. And I hope that helps answer your question. Okay, with that, I'm going to go talk a little bit about Audacity. One of the lovely things about Audacity is that it's something you install on your computer, but you can always access the online manual at any time. This is an overview of the interface of Audacity. I'm not going to show you every tool that you see here, just the ones that we find are most commonly used. And I would note that this is actually a slightly outdated screenshot. Audacity keeps updating and changing the tools that it does or doesn't support every so often. Okay. One quick reminder, and I will go over this. I talked a little bit about this last time, and I will demonstrate this during this workshop. But there's two types of content that we're working with in Audacity. The first is the project workspace, where we actually do all of our work. This is where we bring in each of the individual audio files, we do all the editing we need to do, we mix it, we export it down into one file. I sometimes refer to this as a blank canvas where we're adding different colors of paint, or because I love to bake, I sometimes use a baking metaphor and describe it as a kitchen where I bring in all of my individual ingredients, measure them out, mix them together, and then I put them in the oven, bake them, and what comes out is my podcast. And the important thing to note with that is once I've baked my podcast, if I need to change something, I can't unbake it. I have to go back to my original ingredients. And each of those individual ingredients is a file. Like we can think about it as a raw audio file or a raw ingredient. So you might have flour and eggs and sugar and any number of things. As long as I have those individual ingredients, I can always remix. I can always remeasure. Maybe I forgot to, maybe when I was peeling the butter away from the wrapper, a little piece of wrapper got stuck to the butter and I didn't realize it. I can always repeel it, remove that little wrapper, get it nice and clean. And then when I'm done, I would bake it. And every time I need to fix it, I would go back to those ingredients, remix, rebake. So in the process of creating my podcast, I might have 3 or 4 different versions of what I've baked before I get like that final perfect cake that I am ready to share it with the world. So that's something you're going to see me do and see me demonstrate and engage in today, but I wanted to just make sure that that's clear. So when we talk about those raw audio files, those ingredients, generally speaking, we're talking about WAV files or MP3s. I generally am going to work with MP3 because it's a more compressed, smaller file. If you don't have a lot of space on your computer, MP3 is always going to be the way to go. WAV files are much bigger. And again, those M4As, those are produced if you are using, say, a voice memo app at least on an iPhone or in Zoom. And not all audio editing software can actually open that natively. So you would just have to convert it. And there's links to that in all of the tutorials. Okay, I'm going to skip over this for I'll skip over that for just a moment and just talk through a few other things and then switch over. So there's lots of handy toolbars in Audacity. And the latest version of Audacity likes to play this little trick on us where it hides some of the most useful tools, and we don't really know why. But in particular, the device toolbar, so we can see when we're recording that we have things configured correctly. And oddly enough, the cut, copy, paste toolbar. This is one of our most important toolbars because it's a way for us to quickly cut parts of audio or paste audio or something like that. You can configure your toolbars in any way that you like. You can turn tools on and off, and you can rearrange what your Audacity software looks like. I think I mentioned this last time, but I have a really hard time if I don't have things in exactly the same place between each editing session. So I take time to always rearrange my workspace or my kitchen or my palette so I can find all my tools quickly. And then I'll show you a few things, how to zoom in and out to see more or less of the audio file. We want to zoom out to see the whole file to get a sort of bird's eye view, and then zoom in when we're doing detailed editing. How to select audio, which for me was actually the hardest thing about learning Audacity, was learning how to select a segment of audio. And our frenemy, the playback loop, which I'm not going to demo today other than to say that if you want to listen to a segment of your audio over and over and over again, you can loop it just for playback. But the reason we don't love this tool is that it can be very easy to accidentally click it and then be in a loop and not realize you're in a loop and then feel like you've done something wrong or broken something. And so we've learned to sort of manage that. And I can show you what it looks like, but I try to avoid it as much as possible. And of course, I can't hide that toolbar. For whatever reason, Audacity won't let me do that. Okay, with that, I'm going to show you some basic editing, how to improve the quality of your recording if you're not recording in a great space, or if you've made you have a lot of false starts or coughs or things like that. Then we're going to talk about how to mix things together. So with that, let's get into the good stuff. Okay, so hopefully you are seeing an empty Audacity space. And what I'm going to do is just sort of with my mouse, I'm going to mouse over things so you can get a general sense of the layout. Again, keeping in mind that you can turn toolbars on and off under the view menu. And so I have turned on what's called my transport tools. That's what allows me to traverse the audio file, as well as I've turned on my cut, copy, paste, and my device toolbar so I can see that I need to configure things in case I want to do any recording, to use my plugged in USB microphone to do a stereo recording, and so that y'all can hear it, because I'm running this through Zoom, changing my speaker to Zoom. If I weren't on Zoom, I would set this to my speakers or my headphones. But if you want to hear what I'm hearing, I have to set it this way. So with that, I'm going to bring in the very first audio file that I ever created to teach a podcasting class back when I knew nothing about podcasting. Now, there's two ways that I can bring in an audio file. I can go to File and Open. And if I do that, if I have an empty Audacity window, it will just open up here. If I already have a file loaded in my Audacity window, if I hit open, it will open up in a new window. So for now, I'm going to just start by going to this file. This is a file I created back in 2016 with wired headphones using the voice memo app on iPhone, walking my dog on a busy street in San Diego. And I'm going to zoom in using my zoom button, and you'll notice as I hover over a tool, it will tell me what it does. So again, these are my transport tools, my record, which I'm not going to do right now, my play. If I'm here and I want to jump to the very beginning of the audio file, I would click this, or to the very end of the audio file, I would do that. Wherever your selector, your cursor is, that's where the file is going to start playing. And we're heading to one of the trails of Balboa Park. If you don't know where this is Hillcrest neighborhood. And there's this tiny... And if you can hear that, it's kind of noisy. There's wind blowing. You can hear the little jangle of my dog Ginny's dog tags. And I purposely made a very messy audio file. And so I made it not quite 2 minutes long, and I know that based on this timeline here. There's also a time meter down here that can show me where I am. So I'm 46 seconds into the recording. And if you recall from last week, when I either record or play back, you'll see this meter light up. And the goal, again, is we don't want to get into trails, sort of red territory. If you don't know where this is Hillcrest neighborhood. And we use that green to sort of monitor our sound levels. So I'm going to go jump to the beginning, and I'm going to zoom in quite a bit more and just play maybe the first 9 seconds. Now, a quick explanation of what I've just done, because it looks really easy, and this was the hardest thing for me to learn in Audacity. If you want to grab a selection of audio, you only want to play the selection, or you want to edit a selection or cut a selection, you can put your cursor anywhere. And then holding down, I'm using an external mouse on my laptop. Holding down the select button on my mouse, I'm now dragging my mouse. And I don't have to be precise. Once I get a little bit of a selection, I can hover over either edge, and you'll see that little hand icon. And I can drag as the audio, the selection as far as I want, either way. It's Wednesday, September 28th, and I am experimenting with voice memos for the purposes of... Okay, so what I could do is there's a couple things I might want to do to improve this. First of all, I can see, just because I've been working with audio quite a bit, that my waveform, that's the visual representation of my voice when I was recording, the capture was very low. Like you can see that there's not a lot of sound coming through. So what I might want to do for starters is amplify everything. And so what I'm going to do, excuse me, is this is my control track panel here, and this is my best friend. If I click this select button, it allows me to select all of the audio. And then under my effect window, under volume and compression, I can amplify. And I am not very precise when I do this. I just sort of guess a little bit, but I'm going to just drag this dragger up a little bit. And you see now the waveform looks a lot bigger. And if we were to listen to this.
It's Wednesday, September 28th.
Now and you'll notice too,
it's
there's
Wednesday,
a lot more
September
going on up here now.
28th,
See that the green is much higher.
and and
there's more yellow. And yellow is fine as long as we don't hit red. And the reason why I wanted to amplify things is what I'm trying to do is isolate for some of this background noise so I can remove it. Now, generally speaking, if you're recording in a space where you don't have good sound dampening or you don't have a lot of control over the ambient noise, what you want to do is in the beginning or somewhere in the recording, get like a good 5 or 6 seconds of silence. And that way you can pick up all of the regular ambient noise and then create sort of a pattern to filter that out. I didn't do that with this. I have about a second or so here and there. So I'm going to use what I've got and try to make the most of it. If you're in a really good sound recording space, you wouldn't have to do this. But it's always good practice before you start recording with some silence before you start speaking, and then you can always edit that out. So with this, what I'm going to do is just zoom in and try to grab as much of this background as I can. It's a little irregular because you can hear that sort of bell sound. That's the dog walking, and that's an irregular sound. It's not a constant. So this might not work completely. So what I'm going to do is say to Audacity, study this pattern, and anywhere you find it, remove it. And so under my effect window, under volume, I'm going to go to, I want to go to noise removal and repair, to noise reduction. And I'm going to say, build a profile of that background noise. Nothing happens. It's just sort of storing that. I'm going to say select, go back to effect. And now under noise reduction, I'm going to say, apply. I could either preview it or just say, do it. And what you notice now is these moments of silence there's a lot less happening. If I undo that and we play that again, oops, let me redo that. A little bit better. And then if we were going to play that,
it's Wednesday.
I might need to do it again. I might not have done it enough, but I can keep tweaking with that a little bit, or I might find another part to do this on. Effect, noise reduction, get noise profile, select, and apply it to everything. And now it's a lot better. So now let's listen to that.
It's Wednesday, September 20th.
And you notice I sound a little bit tinny now.
And I am experimenting with.
So I would need to work on that as well. So again, the best thing to do is to try to control your recording space as much as you can. A lot of people like to, when they're doing interviews, like to go outside and they, get capture the birds chirping and they think it sounds more natural, and that's fine. But if it is windy, you're going to pick up a lot of wind to the point where you might hear more wind than voice. So just be careful, especially on those windy days. It's probably not a good idea to record outside on a windy day, unless you're trying to record the sound of wind, and then it's great. Okay, I'm going to pause there, and I see Patrick's putting some comments in the chat about noise reduction. He could give you more of a technical explanation than I can. I don't even know the technical terms really. I just sort of make up my own technical terms. But while that's going on, I'm going to move on to the next thing. So I'm just going to close that out. I'm not going to save any of my work because I was just demoing that. Okay, So now let's say that you're in a room together and you're recording an interview with two people, and one person is sitting really, really close to their microphone and their gain is up too high, so their voice is kind of crackling. Another person is way too far away from their microphone or maybe speaking too quietly. Again, whenever you're recording, you want to try to test for that before you start doing the actual recording. The goal is to get as even a recording sound as possible. But some things happen. Like we were doing a podcast a couple months ago where we had everyone perfectly positioned and then the host kept looking away. And so every time he spoke, he was doing this, and we couldn't actually capture his voice as well. So it's really important that we have everyone positioned, but things happen, and sometimes we don't get the best capture. And here's an example of that. Back in 2020, I was testing a tool called CleanFeed, which I used to show, and I don't recommend it anymore because it's actually not my favorite. And what CleanFeed would do was capture two people's voices in a recording session, much like you can do in Zoom. This was really important early in the pandemic because we were all isolated from each other. So we had to rely on these kinds of tools to record. We couldn't safely all gather around a microphone to record together. And so if you look at this, you might see some wild fluctuations in the audio in the waveform. And that's because there are two speakers. I was speaking here, and then I was talking to my partner, and I don't know what was going on with his setup, but he was way too close. And so if I play just a little crackle of this, a little bit of this, and you're joined by our pup, Ginny. How's she doing?
I am. She's doing quite well.
So you'll hear a couple things. You'll hear and you'll see in the playback how his voice goes all the way up to the red. That's bad. And you'll hear too that crackle. Let me play that a little bit more.
I am. She's doing quite well. She's in her...
So there's a distortion there. Now I can de-amplify his voice, but I'm never going to be able to get rid of that crackle. And that's why we want to be very mindful not to get that crackle. If you are a loud talker like I am, what you need to do is lower the gain on your microphone or be a little further away from your mic. If I talk way too close to my microphone at my normal speaking volume, I'm going to just crackle all and distort throughout my recording. So what we would need to do is select each of his pieces of audio and de-amplify them. And that can be really cumbersome. So rather than do that one at a time, what I like to do is slice up my audio file and create essentially a multi-track. So essentially what I would do is position my cursor where he starts speaking and either go to edit audio clips and split, or right click there and do the same thing. And then do that again. And that produces the following. What I've essentially done here is created two audio tracks, dragged him down to the bottom, and then I can just sort of edit his audio levels all at once. So to do that, what I would have done is after splitting things up, oops, go to edit, split, do one more split there under edit, audio clip split. And then what I would do is under tracks, I would add a new, in this case, a stereo track. Because I'm on a small screen, I'm losing a lot of screen real estate. So I'm going to just make this a little smaller. And then I'm just going to hover over that clip and drag it down, keeping it in place. And I know it's still in synchronous place because I see that yellow vertical line that's kind of like a grid mark, and drag it down and zoom, pan over a little bit more, drag it down some more. And then what I can do is de-amplify him by hitting that select button, effect, and then under amplify, bring it down. Now, again, we're still going to hear that crackle.
I am. She's doing quite well.
So I can't get rid of the distortion, but I can at least de-amplify. So that's a handy trick there. Okay, now with that, I'm going to start to show you how to create a podcast with some other additional editing, and then we're going to mix it all together and bake it. And I'm just checking the chat to see. Okay, there's Patrick's answering some questions there. Okay, so I'm going to start with the audio file that I created last week. And I created this audio file here. I created it as both an AUP3 project file and as a standalone audio file, an MP3. Sometimes some people like to edit each individual file and then import it into their kitchen workspace or their project workspace for the final mixing. And you can do it either way. One of the nice things, though, is you might want to you want to sort of keep an original version of the audio file. So if you're going to work on that audio file, what you would want to do is open it in Audacity, and then when you go to export it out, give it a new name so that you're not actually messing with the original file. Now, we're not going to play the whole thing here, but this was the recording that I did in the last session. Principles of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Let me start over. Principles of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Okay, so I had a false start. And again, when we were talking about recording last week, I mentioned that if you make a mistake, just pause a little bit and backtrack a little bit and start over. And that way it's easier to stitch it back together. As I spill water all over myself. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in, and what I can do is a couple of different things. I have this false start here. Principles of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Let me start over. Okay. And so it's about here. There's a couple things I can do. I can delete that by clicking the scissor button or just clicking the delete button on my computer. I can silence it by clicking this silence audio selection. Or I can just do what's called non-destructive editing. And the difference here is, if I edit this, if I go to delete this, that's a destructive edit. Once I save my work, it's gone forever. If I do what's called non-destructive editing, I can get rid of it, but it's not gone forever. So I can take on either the beginning or the end of my audio file, and if I hover, you're going to see a little icon that looks like a bracket with two arrows, and that allows me to drag the file to where my cursor is, and it's effectively gone. But if I made a mistake, I can undo that work. And again, I'd want to zoom in to make sure that I'm not messing that up. Of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Let me start over. Okay, so what I can do is just drag that to here, to the new start. Principles of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Small is good. And I can begin to edit things out that way. Now, if I make a mistake in the middle, let's say, I can't remember where I made mistakes. Change is constant, be like water. There is always enough time for the right work. Somewhere around here, maybe. Small is good, small is all. The large is okay, so this part here, again, I can delete this or silence it, but if I do that, if I silence it, or if I hit delete, let me undo that. If I silence it, I still have silence. If I delete it, it's destructive. So another thing that I could do is slice it here. And if I do that, just space this out a little bit, I can actually just destructively edit that bit, making sure that I'm not losing anything. The large is a reflection of the small. Changes, and I can keep doing that. Somewhere around here, I coughed. Wow, I actually remembered where I did that. And again, I can do the same thing where I can splice going either edit, or in this case, I'm right clicking. And when I hover over the name, you'll see that hand icon, I can just drag that out and then get rid of it. Oops, put it there. Less prep, more present. Okay, so I could keep doing that and get this audio file exactly how I want it. Now, in the interest of time, I actually already did that and created a new version of that project here, where I segmented it and got rid of all of the coughing and the false steps and things like that. And this is what I'm going to use to begin to build my file. So one thing I can do is if I want to space things out a little bit, or if I want to create more clips, I can move things around. Let's say I wanted to split it here as well. And I could also rearrange. I can move this to the very end by just dragging it over these clips, or I could move this to here if I wanted it, keeping in mind that you have to have enough space in your audio track bed. So this little guy here could move over here, but this bigger file won't fit until I make enough room for it. So I'm just going to select these clips, scooch them down, bring this down, and bring it over here. Everything's undoable, so I could click undo, 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 all of that, and have it be any which way. I could also join these clips together if I wanted them, if I liked the spacing of them and I wanted to have less pieces to work with. I could actually select all three by just holding my mouse down, right clicking, and click join clips. And now I have fewer clips to work with. So I can do that as well. Now let's actually begin to build our multi-track. So I'm the first voice. And what I'm going to actually do is just move myself over to maybe 15 seconds in, maybe fewer, a little bit less than that. And then I'm going to bring in Patrick's voice. Now, in this case, if I go to open, excuse me, it's again, because I already have a file in my project, it's going to open it in another window. And I could copy and paste that into my project, or I could go to File, Import, and bring in his voice. And there he is. And what I would probably want to do is, you'll notice like it starts with just him speaking, but here we're speaking over each other.
When I was in
Strategy
Bloom,
by
my
Adrian
heroes.
Marie. So what I would have to do is space it out so that we're not talking at the same time. So I would need to split his track. Similarly, let's just do some random splits. I'm just looking at where there's silence, knowing that this is a clean audio file that he has produced. I'm just doing this randomly. And then I'm going to also just scooch this down for now because I need a little bit of room to work. Oops, what's going on here? That's not working. Okay, sometimes things don't do what we want them to do, so we just find a workaround. And now I'm going to bring in some intro music by going again to, I could either do import, or if I just want a little bit of intro music, I could just go and grab, let's say I want maybe this much. I could just select that and go to edit, copy. Now I'd have to add a new track, and it's a stereo track. And I'm going to go to the very beginning and paste it in. And in this case, I'm going to, I can either paste what's called the smart clip. That's the non-destructive version. So if I do that, if I do the selected audio only, that's all I have. And if I realize that I don't have the right amount, I have to go back to the original. Or if I go to paste the smart clip, it's still the same amount, but there's more there. So if I didn't precisely grab what I wanted, I can always fix that. And I probably don't need quite that much, so I would probably do maybe this much. And if I go to the beginning, first of all, it's a lot louder than our recording, so I'm going to just turn what's called this gain slider down. It's just sort of a volume for playback. There's a more technical term for that Patrick can explain in the chat. And then I'm going to do, to make it smooth, I'm going to make a little fade in. Maybe the first like 7 or 8 seconds by selecting that, and under my effect window, just pick regular studio fade in, and then maybe do a little fade out as well. Under effect, fading, fade out. And then I'm going to start to place my audio tracks. I'm going to have to make everything a little bit smaller. And then to help me see things better, I can actually change the color of things under my control panel. So I might want to make Patrick red, and maybe the intro music will be green, just to help me see it better. So what I'm going to do is grab all of this and move it down and have Patrick come in maybe right around there, bring me over a little bit more. And then I'm going to just kind of randomly start to move things around. Now, normally I would have this sort of scripted out and figure how I want to do it. But let's say I want to have the voices intermixed, taking turns. I'm just going to line them up using that yellow vertical line to help me place things. And again, I'm just doing this very randomly, just not even artfully. I'm going to put one more split there. Bring Patrick in here. I might actually join these two together, so I have less clips. And then I'm running out of room here. There we go. There. And then just because we only have about 10 minutes, I'm going to just do a few more little edits, and then we'll take a listen and see what needs to be done. I want to have some background music playing throughout this. So I'm going to go in and import some audio here. We'll make this another color, maybe black. And let's say I want the middle portion. I can do that non-destructive editing, grab the part of it that I want. Oops. Let's say I just want this bit. I'm going to turn down that volume quite a bit. And again, we're going to want to do that nice little fade in, fade out. Maybe a really long fade in this case. Oops, that's the wrong kind of fade out, fade in. I accidentally clicked fade out instead of fade in. And we'll do that again here. Effect, fade out. I could also bring in some sound effects if I wanted to. I have some, I think here I'm talking about the ocean. It's good. Small is all. Nope. It's here. The large is a reflection of the small. That down a little bit. Maybe here. Change is constant. Be like water. So if I wanted the sound of water or waves, I could add that in as well. But it doesn't quite match with the music, so I'm going to ignore that. And then finally, let's bring in some background music. I'm sorry, some outro music. Again, because I clicked open, it's going to open in another window. I'm just going to randomly grab some audio because I'm going to do the smart clip, go to track. I'm going to add a new stereo track, and I'm going to, towards the end of my file, hit paste and do the smart clip. I could have also just imported the audio in. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm running out of room here, so I can't see what I'm doing very well. I'm just going to pull this out so I can see it all. Oops. Oh, I actually didn't copy what I thought I did. Actually, let's just do this instead. Let's just import it. It's going to be easier. Okay. And you'll notice it created a new track, and that's because I have an empty track, but every time I hit import, it's going to import a new one. So I can just get rid of that track. And again, I'm just going to, I'm going to non-destructively edit, place it about where I want it. Oops, having a little bit of lag time here. Do again a fade in with a very gentle fade out here. And now what I've got is, how many, let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tracks in my audio file. All told, it's not even 2 minutes long. So in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to bake this. And then if we have to edit it, we'll go back and do that. So I'm going to just save my work because I'm working in a project space. And now under File, I'm going to say Export. I'm going to transform each of these individual files into one audio file. I'm going to give it a specific name. Let's say version 1, 1. Checking to make sure it's recorded, it's saving where I want it to. And I'm going to put some metadata in here. It's pulling from some of my free music. So I'm going to change that. Sorry, it's called One Podcast. B.
One SDSU podcast.
Ah, perfect. One SDSU podcast. I can leave these blank. This is 2024, if you can believe it. And it's a podcast. The rest I'm going to just get rid of. This gets baked into my audio. And I'm going to export it. And it doesn't look like anything happened. And that's because it actually exported out. And so what I just created is this. I'm going to, if I double click it, it's going to open up, because it's an audio file, it's going to play in my default audio player. I'm going to right click it to play it in Audacity. And there it is. And that is the same, that is the exported sort of baked version of that. Oops. So if we go to listen to it, we can listen and see what we need to do with it.
Hello, my name is Patrick Flanagan.
Principles of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown.
I am the Digital Humanities Center Programs and Operations Specialist at the Digital Humanities Center at San Diego State University Library.
Small is good, small is all.
When I was in Bloom, my heroes encouraged to make your own art, be your own band, to own your own voice that is unique to you.
The large is a reflection of the small. Change is constant, be like water. There is always enough time for the right work. There is a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have. Find it. Never a failure, always a lesson. Trust the people. If you trust the people, they become trustworthy.
I am an Arsenal fan. I am the artistic entity known as Punk Rock Drum Machine.
Move at the speed of trust. Focus on critical connections more than critical mass. Build the resilience by building the relationships.
I am a human of many voices. Many voices.
Endless voices.
I'll tell you what. Good day.
Less prep, more presence. What you pay attention to grows. Okay, so that's a good first start, but what you can probably hear is that the sound levels are off. Now, I can't really edit this here. I can lower all of this, but then everything gets lowered. What I need to do is go back to my workspace, and I need to fix this. So for instance, I forgot to lower the volume on the outro music, so I need to do that. I also noticed that Patrick is a little softer than me, so I'm going to raise him up just a little bit. Now, you can actually do technical amplification and make it very precise. I'm just doing this spot check kind of way. And then we'll just play a little bit to make sure that this works.
I'll tell you what. Good day.
Less prep, more presence. What you pay attention to grows. And, maybe there's just too much outro, so I'll just scooch this down a little bit, make it a little shorter. I'm going to save this again, and then I'm going to re-export it and have another version of this. So this is now going to be, version 2, same metadata. Okay. And here's version 2. And if I open that up in Audacity, and if we only listen to the end, you'll see the end looks very different. It looks a lot cleaner there. It's not as big a shift in audio levels.
Endless voices.
I'll tell you what. Good day.
Less prep, more presence. What you pay attention to grows. Okay. So again, because I'd already mixed it, I had to go back to here, my original ingredients, and just tweak those levels a little bit. So it's a process of doing that sort of back and forth. I see that we are just about out of time. I want to see if there are any questions about that. I know I kind of sped through it quite a bit. And Patrick and I, of course, are always available to Zoom and work with you, help you. We routinely teach podcasting over Zoom. We're very comfortable doing that. So I'll put our email addresses, or Patrick, if you want to put your email address in the Zoom in the chat as well. And before I forget, we also have a little feedback form if you want to give us some feedback. Any questions about that? I see we're just at time.
Pam, I actually do have one question. I guess when you started your podcast, tour, how long did it take you to get kind of comfortable with hearing your own voice, or did it help that you can just edit it and you were like, well, that's not how I actually sound, so I'm okay?
Oh, that is such a great question. To be perfectly honest, I have never gotten fully comfortable with my voice. That is the hardest part of podcasting, is just accepting your voice. I hear all the little foibles of my voice. I sort of make this smacking noise before I speak, and I have a lot of swishy saliva sounds in my mouth. The goal here is that you want to sound human. So we always tell folks, don't over edit your voice. It's okay to cut some likes and ums out, but you want to sound like your authentic self. And so don't get tripped up on that and just embrace your voice. We work with a lot of folks who are very self-conscious about their voice, or maybe if they're doing an English language podcast, but they're not confident with their English speaking capabilities. And we just encourage folks, be you, be genuine, authentic, embrace your voice and all of its beauty, and know that the things that you hear, other people won't hear. So if you do a little vocal fry, do the vocal fry. If you make clicking noises, make your clicking noises, and you'll be the only one to notice that. But to Patrick's point, when you're recording, if you are getting distracted by the sound of your voice when you're recording, turn the volume down on your microphone if your headphones are plugged into your microphone. It's part of why I don't like to wear headphones when I'm recording, because I don't want to hear my voice amplified as I'm recording. It's too distracting, and I get so hung up in how I sound that I forget about what I'm trying to say. So there's all these little tricks that you can do to trick your brain. And again, just say I love my voice. I have a voice worth listening to, and it belongs out in the world.
I also have a question, Pam.
Yeah.
When we are, for example, if we edit the audio of our video podcast, we can remove the original audio of the video and then add the edited?
If you are working with video and audio simultaneously, you will have to use video editing software like Adobe Premiere. What that will do is have a video track and an audio, or several audio tracks. And you would have to sort of edit each one and make sure everything stays in sync. To be perfectly honest, I don't work with video. I find it overwhelming. Patrick has been doing quite a bit of work with video, but conceptually it's the same. So you can do the same kinds of things where you can slice, you can change things, you can do fade outs and effects and things like that. But when you add video to the mix, it's going to be that much more complicated, right? Because you're going to have that many more layers. Your files are going to be bigger until you mix it down into an MP4. So it's going to be that much more. So if you're just getting started with podcasting, I would recommend you stick to audio, and then when you're comfortable, bring that video in. Or you could do what some folks do, where they maybe have their phone filming while they record, and that's sort of additional content. And some folks set up a Patreon to like have that additional content. But we always encourage folks, when you're just getting started, to scale back and start small. And then as you get more comfortable and confident in your skills, add more to it. But increasingly, we're seeing people wanting to use video in their podcasting. And I will say that YouTube is trying to support podcasting now that has both together. And so that might be something to explore. We haven't actually experimented with video, but we're increasingly getting questions about it.
Great. Do we have any more questions from the audience? I think that's it then. That was fantastic, Pam. I think after these workshops, we have gained so much knowledge of podcast creation and editing. Thank you, Pam.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And we're here to help you. So reach out whenever, along the way, whenever you get stuck.
No, definitely. I would have to add that this workshop was very, very interesting to see how the audio and how we can tune it. I hope our viewers and podcast team can use these softwares to create content on social media. And who knows, maybe you'll catch us using auto-tune.
Thank you again, Pam. Y nos vemos el próximo episodio el viernes 16 de febrero de 11 a 12, en donde aprenderemos podcast streaming in multiple platforms.
So yes, next Friday's episode sounds amazing. Thank you everyone for tuning in to One SDSU podcast, and feel free to send your feedback in the following link in the chat below to our email onesdsupodcast@gmail.com and our Instagram onesdsupodcast.
También puedes ver las grabaciones de este podcast en nuestro YouTube channel One SDSU Podcast o en el live stream en the Cross Cultural Center's Instagram. Nos vemos en el siguiente episodio. Gracias a todos por estar aquí.
And again, I am your co-host, Daniel Lopez.
And I'm your co-host, Andrea.
And we are One SDSU
United.
United.